It's loading. All right, guys, welcome in to Using Data and Analytics, Where to Start and How to Drive Value. We're set for a great webinar. We got a panelists of loaded people with tons of insight, tons of information. My name's Adam White with Front Office Sports. I will be the moderator / host. You probably won't be hearing much from me because we're going to let the experts really break it down for you, but we're excited to have you on this nice Thursday afternoon. Hopefully it's not too snowy where you are, and hopefully you're getting ready for the weekend and have some exciting plans ahead. But before we get into the questions, I'm going to get the panelists and let them have a few moments to introduce themselves, why they're here, and really why you should be listening. So we'll start with Vince over at Stellar Argo. Vince, let's start us off here.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me on. By way of background, so I've got over 12 years in data-related roles. 9 of those are in the sports entertainment industry. Have spent time building out data-driven cultures and teams at the NBA organization, in the NHL, as well as for some minor league properties throughout my career. Now at Stellar Algo, we've got a really great team and have created a customer data platform essentially that's helping organizations to understand their fans better and action that data in order to create real value from their data. So yeah, that's where I'm here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, we do have to say thanks for Vince and the team at Stellar Argo for putting all of this together and helping us get it off the ground. So thanks again, Vince, and looking forward to having you and joining us from all the way from LA. Lisa, how's it going?
It's going great. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Lisa Rollins with the LA Galaxy of Major League Soccer. I am horrified to realize that 2018 was my 15th season with this club. It's been a tremendous ride from being here at StubHub Center, signing David Beckham, and all of the amazing accomplishments we've had since then. I started in group sales, moved into customer service, launched our season ticket service team, and have now been about 7 years working specifically with data and analytics. So I'm looking forward to learning from my fellow panelists and hope that I can impart some value to all of you listening.
And Lisa did, we think, mention that she is probably the person single-handedly responsible for the LA Galaxy being the number 2 most valuable team in the MLS, according to Forbes. We can neither confirm nor deny that, but I think we can definitely decide that she played a key role in that. So thanks, Lisa. Appreciate you having us and appreciate you joining us. And now let's switch back, and it's a little bit of a colder climate. I think Brian mentioned it was 20 degrees. Brian, all the way from Milwaukee. How's it going?
Not bad. I think we might get to 30 today, so it's kind of a heat wave. I'm Brian Martins, Milwaukee Admirals of the American Hockey League. Thanks for having me again. I am the Director of Ticket Operations. This is my 13th season. Like Lisa, started in ticket sales, went to operations, and just starting to get the feet wet in the analytics side. Over the summer, we realized we were behind that and kind of took it upon myself to get us going in that area. So I don't know if expert is the best title for me that you mentioned in the beginning, but I'm getting there. So I am definitely learning as I go. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert in bringing in the crowds,
right,
though, because we do have quite a bit of AHL presence here, and we believe it is on the backs of everyone wanting to hear from you.
Sure
so excited to have you here, and then we're going to switch back over to the West Coast and Chip Maxson, General Manager for the Sacramento River Cats. You guys are in your off-season mode, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Good morning on the West Coast. Good afternoon on the East Coast. Thrilled to be a part of this. This will be my 16th season in minor league baseball, and similarly, when I say that out loud, it's shocking. I started way back in college, just did an internship and did it with the minor league team in the suburbs of Chicago, and fell in love with everything about minor league baseball, the impact on the community, the goofiness. We were just talking offline a little bit ago about we're not afraid to try new things and push the envelope. And that's kind of what's led us here at the River Cats to really explore the data and analytics side. And been blessed to get to know people throughout the industry and always try and take what the NFL or Major League Baseball is doing, or MLS or AHL, and say, hey, what applies to minor league baseball? And I've also learned there's a lot of smart people out there, a lot smarter than me, and if I can learn from them, I need to try and apply it. And so that's what's brought us to where we're at using data and analytics right now with the River Cats.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you joining us. So, without further ado, I think we can kind of just jump in. You guys both mentioned, you're at the forefront of your leagues in terms of pushing some data-driven decision-making forward. Have you always been predisposed to using data and numbers to help you do your jobs? And if not, how have you kind of evolved? I know, Brian, you mentioned that this was something new to you, so maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, happy to do that. We've always used data and analytics, just it wasn't as organized. So now that we're realizing, what we can do, what customers are looking for, and that not everyone's the same, definitely digging deeper, below the surface to see what people want and how we can reach them is what we're trying to accomplish. So far. So that's kind of where we're at as far as getting more organized with our data right now.
And for you, where is the organization happened, right? Was it spreadsheet to now having some type of system? What has helped you, at least in that role?
Yeah, it was spreadsheets, and there wasn't necessarily even organization as far as when and where. It was, I wonder what this is, or I wonder who's coming to this particular game regularly, or whatever it happens to be. Now we're on with Vince, the Stellarago platform, and everything's organized with us there. We're getting data daily, so that's now that every day we're learning something new.
Yeah. That's good to hear. And Lisa, you've been around and you've been in the industry for quite some time, as you mentioned. How has the data, at least in your role, kind of shifted, and how have you evolved with that?
Sure. I think in a lot of ways it's similar to what Brian just described. I think organizationally we always had the dream of being more data-driven, but we didn't always have the resources. And for us, resources being the work hours, the head count, the skill set, certainly the technology, really the understanding to do that effectively. Now that we've acquired some of that, I think we have a firmer handle, and we're becoming more reliant upon the data because we're getting it more consistently. It's delivered in a way that allows us to derive insights from it more easily, and we can layer our gut over the science that we're seeing through the data.
And that's a huge part, right? Is that you don't have to. It's not a gut decision anymore. It's a gut decision, but you have the numbers backing you up.
Absolutely. There's a science, but there's always an art that goes along with that science.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Chip, on the minor league baseball side, I'm sure it's similar in terms of the resources. Has data been a big thing for you to help you guys do your job, or is it something that you've kind of picked up recently in the last few years as the industry has shifted towards that way?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Resources specifically, the conversation in minor league baseball right now is people know they need to be using data, and it's where do you start and how do you get the resources to do it. And here with prior teams and with the River Cats, for so long we'd live on spreadsheets and trying to look at, what do we average over 3 to 5 years, and just trying to put things together that way. And so now with some of the new platforms that are coming along, and with Stellar and some others, it allows you to aggregate that data and really start diving deeper into it. And when I say I've learned about analytics, it's scary. It's a big onion. You start peeling back a layer. You ask one question, you figure it out, and it leads to 10 more questions. And so that's where those resources become important. And so, our goal is to how do we be as efficient as possible and find the right amount of information that's actionable and that we can actually use without spinning our wheels and going down too many rabbit trails.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing you mentioned, the 1 to the 10. Is there ever been something that, you just want to make sure, hey, how do you stay focused, right? When 1 turns to 10, has there been something that you've kind of leaned on?
End of the day, it's what are our goals? And that's something that talking with Vince, some of his team, and talking to others in the industry, it's really identifying what goals do we have for data and analytics? What are we trying to answer? I think, you go back to Jim Collins and the hedgehog concept. It's let's stay focused on certain things, and because sometimes it's just fun to see what the data tells you, but it's not necessarily relevant. And so as we start pulling back the layers, our team will get together and say, okay, what are we really trying to answer right now, and what's the action item we're trying to get from this? And so having that focus has helped us stay on track and not go down too many trails.
Definitely. And now, Vince, on the vendor side, has it been with you? I know you spent a lot of your time with the Blazers in an analytics related role, but as the industry has changed, has this been something that you guys have also had to educate people on?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some education. I think thankfully there's so many great domain experts that exist. You have people like who we have on this webinar. They really do understand their businesses. They understand the goals for their business and for their underlying fan bases. What's been exciting, I think, is that a couple of things. One, I think systems have gotten a lot more powerful and more capable. So you have the ability to really make sense of data at a level that you haven't been able to in the past. Things are more predictive than they've ever been. So I think that's really nice. And then I do think that for me as an analytics person and a data person, really it's the fact that people are busier than they've ever been in fan bases. People have there's more competition for their time, their energy. They're seeing more marketing messages than they have ever before. So you've really got to be able to cut through that noise. So the importance of data is just continuing to increase. And I think that that's something that everybody realizes is not going to go away anywhere or anytime soon. So being able to really understand fans across systems, connect those data points so that you can continue to have those timely, organic conversations with fans. I really think that it's an exciting time to be getting involved in data analytics. Whether you've been doing this for a while, like some of our panelists, or whether you are just brand new, trying to take a step forward and a big step up. I think it's an exciting time for sports and for data-driven people.
And speaking of time and really just the evolution, from your side, and then we'll jump into the other people on the panel. What are the trends that you've really been seeing that maybe people are coming to you about, that you guys are watching? What are you trying to not only look at but also try and get in front of?
Yeah, I think I love what Chip had said about the goals. I think that is so vital and important. Understanding, yes, goals for the data, but also the it starts with the business goals. What are those measurable business goals overall for your organization, and then how can your data strategy really support you accomplishing those goals? And so I think that the technology changes so quickly, frankly, that even if you've been doing this for a while, taking a step back to reevaluate how you're doing things and how data is empowering you in your day-to-day decision making, I think is just really critical. So I think for us, what we're all about at Stellar Algo is making that data actionable, understanding the data and audiences better, so that you can really nurture those fans in a way that ultimately results in value. I think that an evolution for the analytics space that's exciting is really thinking about, what is the return on some of this analytics investment that we've got? We're starting to use this data. What does that mean to us? How is that improving conversion rates for my business? How is it helping me retain more season ticket members? Ultimately, how is it growing the affinity and engagement, and ultimately the customer lifetime value of the fans that you have? So we're really all about making that data actionable, and not let's use data just for the sake of using data, but how is it actually resulting in meaningful gains for my business?
And Lisa, as someone who's spent quite a bit of time, I'm sure you've seen different trends. What is it that you're looking at? Are you looking at actionable data and making sure you have the processes in place to execute on that, or is it maybe something differently?
Me, part of this is my background. I mentioned I started in group ticket sales. So much of what we're trying to accomplish initially, our top priority is in the ticketing space. And what it comes down to on the sports business side for us, and I imagine for a lot of other folks on this webinar, is revenue. So we want to get close to that 360-degree customer view. I don't know if such a thing truly exists, but we want to get close to a comprehensive understanding of our customers and our prospective customers within reason. We want to be digestible. There are things that we don't need to know about you, but we do want to know the things that will help us better serve you, know what to approach you with, know how to approach you, and that sort of thing. The other thing I think that has been increasingly important to us is digital ticketing and the secondary ticket marketplaces. Those both represent more data. It's more visibility into who actually is using a ticket and to the true value that that person places on the ticket. So there's more of that data available every month, every season. The challenge for us is in effectively interpreting that information along with all of the other data points we have. And, to Chip's point, making sure that we're keeping our eyes on the goal, not just data for data's sake, but data that's really going to allow us to have business success.
And you mentioned in that answer that you had different things that you want from fans and maybe data that you don't want. For the people who are listening and maybe taking notes about how they can get a better understanding of who it is in their building, what for you guys are the key points that you're looking from a data standpoint to get from a fan? Is it an email? Is it a phone number? Is it who their favorite player is?
I think all of the above. We would ideally like to understand, what is it that makes you want to engage with the Galaxy? For the most part, it's, coming to games, that level of engagement, but also what makes you visit our website? When do you do that? We want to better understand that so we have more insight into what you're looking for and how we can serve that to you. That's a really lofty goal for us, and there's so much that goes into it. But if we understand what makes you tick, are you just here for the soccer? Are you just here because you are interested in the one player we just signed? Are you here because you're thinking of putting your kid in soccer? Are you just looking for something to do on a Saturday night? All of those things are different, and we would like to approach you differently based on what it is that's motivating you.
And speaking of players, I know you guys had a big signing in the offseason, was Zlatan, big personality. Did you guys see any types of data points change that you can share, or was there anything that you guys were capitalizing on once he came onto the team?
I think the biggest area that we saw in terms of data was video views. Zlatan crushed it. He helped by scoring some spectacular goals in really important moments. We certainly, I think, saw his effect on the ticket sales side, looking at some charts on sales by date and seeing the cumulative sales. We could tell just from the shape of the line when Zlatan joined us, and we saw certainly a big increase over what we were forecasting in the games following. But on the digital side, video views on all platforms, on the native player on our website, across social media, he really performed well there for us.
Awesome. Now, Chip, in minor league baseball, is it the same? Are you trying to get a 360-degree view of the fan, or what is it with at least maybe potentially your goals that you guys are working with as there as well?
I just want to get fans. No, it's interesting because my approach has changed, and suddenly now we are trying to get a better view, and whether it's 360 or to Lisa's point, if I can get 180, if I can see half of them, of who they are and what their trends are, that's really something new that we've been diving into this last year, and really trying to segment based on some of that data. Prior, my old school mindset was, okay, we're family friendly, we're affordable. Everybody loves coming out to minor league baseball games in the community. Everybody tells me they've got a great River Cats story. They want to tell me. And then I ask them, yeah, did you come out this year? Oh, no, it's been a couple years. And so that triggered some thoughts that, wait a minute, maybe people aren't coming as regularly as we thought or we would like. And what's triggering that buy process in their mind? Is it just because their kids are part of a little league, program, a softball program, a school program that's coming out? And so as we started looking into the data, and then other programs that we use for some of our digital advertising, we're tracking the pixels on our website, where people are coming from, where they're going afterwards, and that pulls in a fan profile. Now we can see where people are going, what they're like. It creates a whole fan profile for us, the program, working with Ticketmaster and some of the big data warehouses to identify, hey, who are our fans and how regularly are they coming and what are they involved in? And so now we're able to pull that together, have a better idea of who that fan is, and then segment just email segmentation. Yes, Lisa, about email, name, phone number. For us, people get our information from our website and from our emails. So the more we can build that email database, the more we can start communicating to them and hopefully communicating appropriately. 2018 was our big push, where we went away from the mass emails sending to our entire database about an upcoming homestand, and we really started breaking it down and segmenting based on, had people come to weekend games the year before, had they come when a certain team or affiliate is in town, do they come because there's a bobblehead giveaway, and we were able to increase our open rate 7%, which was really significant for us, and the clicks obviously through that too. And so it is important, and I think that wasn't a major goal when we started out, but once we started realizing the impact of understanding who that fan is on just our marketing side, that became a goal. And then secondarily is when we're going out to the market, pitching a corporate partnership, it's great to be able to say, here's our fan, instead of just the traditional, mom, dad, 2 kids and a dog. Now we can say specifically, hey, here's who's coming out on certain nights, and it helps us in that space as well.
Yeah, I think the email is an important part, and something that probably other people, it's not, it's too terribly expensive to execute. For you, the strategies on, segmenting and maybe even messaging, what did you find that had worked well for you guys in 2018 to increase that open rate by 7% based off of the data that you had brought in?
Yeah, and look, again, I'm not the smartest guy. The one thing I learned in college was the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. And so my goal was, hey, let's have the same content in the body of our email. Let's just change the subject line based on people's buying patterns in the past. And so that was just the start. So we didn't try and overcomplicate it. Kept it simple that way. And that increased the open rates. Then once we got our arms around that and had someone within our marketing department really own that, then we're able to start changing up some of the content within that. And I think that's more powerful, but again, it comes back to those resources and time. And so the simple step, just change the subject based on what people have opened in the past. Then start taking time to come up with appropriate content. And so that's really going to be a goal in 19, is to dive more into each email content to make sure that's applicable to the person we're sending it to.
Awesome. Now, for Brian, I know you are just starting your data journey. You mentioned it. What does that look like, and what are some of the first steps that organizations can take to becoming more data driven, or can even learn from what you've done?
Well, I will say that when I first started, this summer my head was swimming. There's so many options out there, so you gotta find what you're comfortable with. Obviously, a lot has to do with budget and everything. So I reached out to a ton of companies and talked with what they could do for us. So just finding the best fit for you is definitely ideal. And going back to what Chip said, one of the first things I learned, on average, like 90% of our individual buyers turn over each year. So like you said, just finding someone that'll help you figure out who's coming to the games, what you can do to attract them, get the information out to them, and then, sell them is definitely where we want to excel eventually and get people back out to the games once, twice every year, exactly like that.
And have you seen that happen with what the data you've had bring in terms of your overall strategy and being able to to use that?
Yeah, it's always tough for us in the early part of the year. First couple months of the season, with a lot of high school football going on. Packers are going on here in Wisconsin. People get excited about that. So sometimes it takes us a little while to get going. But, yeah, definitely finding out who's coming out and when. And then another thing that we're really focused on is retention. So we're already getting data back on who's coming to games, who's missing games. So our season ticket holders are already being talked to if they're missing games, so we can focus on renewals for next year. And yeah, we're already actioning that data, making sure that everything works out at the end. So it's a season process, but we're definitely rolling already.
And what's the strategy behind the people who are missing games in terms of you guys making outreach? What does that look like without giving away too much of your secret sauce?
I wish,
what does that look like?
It's pretty easy. We're a pretty small staff here. So our ticket sales guys are both sales and retention. So it's pretty much just reaching out to them, seeing why they're missing games. When they do show up at a game, doing seat visits, talking to them, making sure that they're getting everything they thought they would out of their full season, half season, flex package, whatever they happen to have. So that once the season progresses and we're in renewal time, they want to come back. Just make them feel welcome.
Awesome. Now, Vince, I know on the vendor side, you probably have some different thoughts about this, but as someone who spent some time at the team on the team side too, what is some of the first steps those organizations can take to make sure that at least their foundation is set, right? So they're not coming in with just like a mound of data and are just trying to sift through it.
Yeah, I think the amount of data is already there for the organizations. And so, whether you have it in a consolidated data warehouse, whether it lives, within the databases, that underlie your email system and CRM system and ticketing system and others, regardless of that, what we really believe in is that, is the actionability of that data and what are you trying to achieve with it? I think what Brian was just saying is really interesting in terms of just, how do we action on the data in order to grow the value? And what we really believe here is that the insights need to be automated. They need to be readily available, and then you need to be able to understand the impact of those. And we think that those three things are really important, and they're items that have been, I think, missed in the past. We've seen organizations that they're already doing things with data. Everybody in sports is. So how do we make those what they're doing more automated and understand the impact of those actions? If you can understand at any given moment during the season, which of your season ticket members are at risk, or is there a segment of individual game buyers that might be a certain product or best suited to a certain promotion or game that's upcoming. Identifying those in a real-time basis so that you can action on them is really critical. And I saw that the old world used to be, I'm going to walk down the hall as a decision maker and ask my analyst to pull some sort of analysis together for me that might take a few hours, it might take a few days. Then I take action on that insight. And then I don't have time to even ever evaluate whether that worked or whether that didn't work. With modern technology and systems, and what we're really doing is making it so that those insights are in front of the decision makers or in front of the fans. And then when the action is taken or put into place, you can understand in an automated way, hey, how did that work? And that really can help you iterate on some strategies, much like what Brian's doing. If you can, we're finding things like, if you contact those individual game buyers with a relevant, message within 72 hours of attending a game, they're over 30% more likely to come back again to an event within the next year. If you wait to the end of the month in order to pull some of that data together, and don't have the time to do the segmentation because you're doing it all manually, you end up leaving a lot of dollars on the table.
Got you. Now, Chip, you guys are fairly new in this process as well. Is there something that, as someone who's seen it for probably at least the last year, that you'd like to look back and say, okay, if you're just starting, this is what I would do differently?
Yeah, it's definitely something where you learn as you go. And I think going back to what I talked about, try and come up with some goals initially. And I think I see Ankit is tuning in, and Ankit works with a couple minor league baseball teams, and he really helps some teams start with focusing on the marketing side and just who's coming to your games, where are they coming from, just coming up with some heat maps that way so you can understand how to spend your money appropriately there. What Brian touched on, retention. When I look back, we should have been focused on retention much sooner. Similarly, I expected, I did a presentation in minor league baseball on this. I expected my staff to do what I did when I came up because that's the way they should do it. They should be like Chip. And then I realized, no, that's not the right way to do it. I was trying to sell and trying to service and retain all of my clients, but we weren't as efficient. I'm not efficient as one person as many people. And so really the last couple of years, we learned from the Padres, their membership model and their significant touch points. And we've used our data to help us understand those significant touch points, who's coming to games, when, let's get in front of them so they meet us face to face and go about retention that way and have a strategic approach that really the last 2 years we've bolstered that. And I wish we would have started that a lot sooner. And then again, as Brian pointed out, I think as throughout sports there's a trend with attendance and how do we get in front of people and get our message out to them. We saw that we had a 5-year average, only 17% retention on single game buyers. That scared the heck out of me. But then it showed opportunity as well. And so this year we really started trying to reach out and what's the value on getting somebody to come a second time during the season or 2 years in a row. There's significant value there. And so it's trying to identify what's the right message and offer, and how do we transition from thinking solely about membership or season ticket retention to that single game retention. And I think that's something that the industry is just starting to pick up on. I know it's a big thing for Major League Baseball. I know it's some minor league meetings. We've been talking about that this fall as well. So those are some of the things that, as I look back, it's like, oh man, I wish I would have picked up on some of this stuff sooner. And now as we're looking forward, it's those revenue pieces that we're building our data plan around.
Awesome. And before we jump over to Lisa and hear from what they're doing, can you just kind of break down for the people who may not know what the Padres significant touch point program is and kind of how you took some takeaways from that?
Yeah, shameless plug for them, and Eric McKenzie, their VP down there of tickets, does a great job putting this model together. I know the Miami Dolphins check out what they're doing as well. Jeremy Walls, their chief marketing officer, had been with the Padres and helped come up with this program. So those are two very smart guys. And so essentially what it is, the membership program, it's built around getting people out to the ballpark. Again, understanding who they are, what brings them to the ballpark, or arena or facility or venue, like Lisa was talking about, and structure their perks around what they're looking for. And then it's not just getting them out there; it's understanding what's the value of an email, what's the value of a text message, a phone call, and then a face-to-face meeting. And so talking to them and their approach of getting those significant touch points would be a face-to-face meeting at a game or event. When you increase those significant touch points, the likelihood for renewal increases. And so we found that this year as well, where it only takes 2 significant touch points for us, 2 face-to-face meetings at a game or at some type of membership event, significantly increases the likelihood, likelihood that somebody will renew. And so we've been using that with some of the retention grading scores that we received from Stellarago to really streamline our approach and who we're calling on and who we're trying to get in front of first, who's most likely to renew, and then who are some of those people that really haven't been responsive, haven't come to a game. We'd love it if they would renew, but it's probably a waste of time or energy to pursue them hard when we need to be pursuing other people that are more likely. And so, again, for everybody tuning in, check out what the Padres are doing, check out what the Dolphins are doing, and I'm sure there's other great programs out there as well.
Awesome. Now, switching gears back to Lisa, as someone who's helped probably the LA Galaxy walk through their own data journey. what can you kind of tell people about them being able to walk through their data journey as they're starting or maybe even taking the next steps?
I was thinking back to what I think were some of the most important building blocks when I was first getting started in this space 7 years ago. And I think these are things that any organization could do to some degree. The first thing I would say is prioritize what's most impactful to you, perhaps what's most available to you, or where your biggest problem is, somewhere where you can recognize some gains. I think that that's where you can see some impact and some immediate gratification, for lack of a better term. And as we've been saying, there's so much data that's flying around. You got to focus in on something. Secondly, I would say to invest some time establishing a repository of information, and it doesn't have to be anything super sophisticated or super expensive. We definitely started out with Excel spreadsheets. We still use a ton of Excel spreadsheets. We're also fortunate to be part of an ownership group that is very devoted, very committed to data. And so we're fortunate that we now have a data warehouse to automate a lot of those spreadsheets and reduce the need for them. But whatever that repository is, some kind of source that you can look back at to establish a basis for comparison. If you're looking at a number and saying, hey, we sold 1,500 tickets, what does that mean? If you sold 600 last year, you're doing great. If you sold 3,000 last year, you're not doing great. But you need to have that basis of information. It takes some time, but it's worth it because it's going to serve as that measuring stick for you moving forward. And I think the other thing I would say is to make sure that there's someone or more than one person who has ownership. Not every organization has the luxury of dedicating headcount to analytics. But I think it's important, even if someone spends 10% of his or her time on it, to have an owner, someone who understands it, someone who enjoys it, someone who understands that data from the origin. I feel very fortunate, although I wouldn't say I was a very good sales executive at all. I think that experience prepared me very well for understanding where the data starts, the call data, the prospects, that sort of thing. And it gave me that understanding of how the data transformed from a call or multiple calls. Whoever that person is in the organization, it's important to have someone who is spending time on it versus collectively saying, yeah, we should really do something with the data, and no one actually doing it. Those are the three things that I think were really important for us and that I think would be beneficial for most organizations.
Awesome. That's great. And, for everyone who's watching currently and is continuing to watch as we head into the final 20 plus minutes here, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them as we come. And as you can see, both Vince and Chip jumped in and just answered Marcus's. So feel free to ask away as you can. And I think we'll head right back to Lisa. You're talking a little bit about the culture and, having that data-driven culture. You grew up with the LA Galaxy in terms of holding the different roles and have kind of probably formed that culture. What are some of the best practices to making sure there is that buy-in across the organization that you can then implement some of this data that you are getting in?
The data itself is one thing, but it's only useful when people are embracing it, and that comes with the culture. The things that I think were very helpful for us is having a champion, someone near the top who is going to influence adoption. It always helps to have a leader who is bought in. But for us, I think it's equally important to find some allies who are further down in the organization. When you have people who are at the top and I want to say the bottom, but lower down in the organization, who are going to benefit directly from that actionable data, I can't tell you how gratifying it is for me if we're using the resources we have to deliver better leads to our sales executives. These are people who need the commission. They want better sales. And for them to come by and say, hey, you know what? That segment that you gave me, they were really great. They answered the phone more. I made, 10% more sales than I did for that other batch of leads you gave me. That's really important, having that buy-in from different levels. I think also, this is very elementary, but encouraging questions, and especially the stupid ones, data is intimidating. It has that reputation, and it doesn't need to be. And if your colleagues don't understand it, they're not going to use it. It's going to be the scary thing that someone else deals with. So taking the time to break it down and just entertain all those questions. I think whatever your solution is, if it's a spreadsheet, if it's something more sophisticated, demonstrating the way you get the solution, teaching someone to fish versus handing them a fish, that's going to involve them more, and it's going to make data more top of mind for them. And then I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I was going to say it's
I
great.
really try to hand out a lot of fish.
I love the fish analogy. I think it's so important.
I think finally, really connecting the dots between the data and action, and spending the time interpreting what you're seeing. For a lot of people, geeking out on data is just not that interesting, and it's difficult. But if you focus in on a few points that are really relevant to them and put them in context, explaining the data is far less important than explaining what that's telling us in a context that your audience is going to understand. And for you to recommend a course of action that's suggested by the data is what's truly beneficial. If you do that over time, more and more colleagues are going to learn and be more comfortable, and they're going to want to seek out that data.
Awesome. I think Lisa just gave us a masterclass on how to drive a data-driven culture. And no pressure, Brian. I don't want to throw it to you too hard, but I know you just started. How have you guys been able to bake data into your culture, and how have you guys been able to kind of make sure that what it is with what you're doing now as people who are newer in the space and newer in what you're using are finding success?
Well, we had
a
pretty good buy-in from the top down too. So, like Lisa said, having our top guy, our team president, was right with me on sales calls and everything with different companies to see what worked best for us, and he was very involved in the process, so that's great. And now that we're actually getting data in from the program, our VP of sales and our directors of season tickets and group sales have bought in as well. We're getting lists to AEs with prospect scores and everything, so they know what to focus on. And like Lisa also said, with commission, it's in their best interest to go after the people. I mean, we got, I think, 800 some leads last year, just individual buyers over the course of the season last week. So that can be daunting. But now that we're being able to score what have they done in the past, where are they from, that type of stuff, and then focusing on the potential buyers, which would make more sense for them to buy with us as opposed to they've come to one game in 5 years. It makes their time management a lot easier, and the sales that they're going to make are going to go up percentage-wise.
Yeah, and for the people who may not be using the scoring system, or for people who would probably like to implement something like that, how does that work for you guys? What's kind of the scale, and how have you been able
you kind of broke up on me there, so I'm just going to well, why don't you, can you repeat that for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I had mentioned that you were talking about the score. How did you come about that score? And for the people who may not have scores in place, what can they learn, or what can you kind of impart on them to
sure, and that was
allow them to potentially put together scores for their prospects?
They would take into account what they've bought before, how much they've paid for tickets, where they're coming from, the frequency that they're attending, and score that out for us. And then they gave us a list on a weekly basis of who's buying, and we get the score and send that out to our reps, and they start the process of selling to them to upgrade them to packages or more individual tickets, whatever it happens to be.
Awesome. Now, Chip, as someone who is really in charge of the organization from a top down level, for you in terms of the data culture and making sure that everyone was kind of bought in, was there something specific you did? Was there someone you leaned on to kind of get some advice from? How did you kind of make sure you were implementing it in a way that people were understanding?
And one of the questions that somebody just asked about what you're looking for when choosing new software, data for insights. For me, it was okay, if we're going to do this change, if we're going to push data and incorporate this into our day-to-day business practices, needed something that it was pretty intuitive. As we all know, the hardest thing is to get somebody to do something new or incorporate something new. Anybody that's changed CRMs or ticketing platforms, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And so I remember, and we've used Vince and his team too, and I remember beating him up early on about, how do we incorporate this? Is there going to be trainings and webinars to make sure that everybody using this program understands how to use it, what's the information, and how do we make it actionable? And so then once I realized that, okay, this was going to be a pretty intuitive platform that we can use and keep things simple for us, then I knew I had to make sure that our main revenue leaders were on board as well. And so we still have weekly meetings where, again, to try and drive this all the way down through the organization. We have weekly meetings where I'll meet with our director of ticket ops, director, VP of ticket sales, inside sales manager, director of marketing, our VP of partnerships, where we'll all come together and talk about what we're using this information for. What's next? What are we looking out in the horizon? What information are we trying to get, and what's our purpose down the road as well? And so it's creating that internal accountability, where I want to make sure that the leaders of those departments are taking this seriously, that they're working with their teams to make use of this data. Again, all the way back to the resources. For us, it was, hey, we've got to see an ROI. We know this information is useful, but if we don't put it to use, as Lisa talked about, give it to people in a nice bundle that they can use it with a pretty bow on it, then it's worthless to us. And so that's how I sold it to my owners was, hey, we're going to use this platform. Here's how we're going to use it. Here's how I'm going to keep the teams accountable each week to make sure that this does get ingrained into our day-to-day business purposes. And so far it's been fun, even down to our ticket sales reps. They love knowing the why behind what we're doing. And so they've, as we've done webinars to teach them and our marketing staff, you see, some of these 22, 23-year-olds, their eyes light up because they're excited to learn some new technology and the why behind things that we do. So it's been a fun approach. We've tried to use it that way as an opportunity to get everybody on board and get them involved with a new direction that we're moving. And so far it's been successful.
Awesome. Love to hear that. And before we jump into some audience questions, I'm going to throw it over to Vince as someone, you spent time driving the data culture at the Trailblazers, and now you're helping people from a vendor side, solve these problems and drive that data culture. What is it that you've seen, and what are your best practices for making sure that people have some buy-in?
You've heard a lot of great ideas from Chip and Lisa and Brian. So I don't. These guys know it so well, so it might be reiterating what they've said. But I think the top-down buy-in, I do think, is really important. It's great to have someone like Chip here, who at the most senior level of an organization is interested in the data, understands how it can support the business goals. So I do think you've at least got to have some top-down understanding that and belief that data can help you to accomplish some of those business goals. I think that's really important. To kind of a point Lisa made, I think the leave it to the experts approach, I think, is something the industry has gotten into some trouble with over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, where people are potentially scared of the data, and they say, well, I need to leave this to a data expert because I really don't understand these things. And I also think that that's a big mistake, because I do think that it's the business problems and the business reasons that should be driving the data strategy, as opposed to the other way around. And anything you're doing on the data side really does have to be in support and in full understanding of what's happening on the business side. Which is, Lisa also mentioned about how she came out of the ticket sales world, ticket service world, and so that knowledge really informs everything that they're doing at the Galaxy from an analytics perspective. So I think that that's a really good point as well. And then the last one I'll mention is I do think having some sort of a regular cadence in order to measure, some of the missions that you've set out for your organization, whether that's on a quarterly basis, annual basis. How are we measuring these things and getting into some sort of a cadence where you're using data in order to help you understand how you're tracking towards some sort of overall business goals, and that can start at a high level, but right down to the rep level, where you have reps that are entering data into CRM system, whether that's Dynamics or Salesforce, or whether you're using an Arctics or Tickets.com or a ticketing backend CRM. If you're not showing transparency into the data and that why that Chip's mentioned as well, in terms of what does this mean? This data, why am I spending time collecting, gathering, entering information? If there's no transparency or visibility into any of that, or understanding of how it helps you to sales or your job easier, you're not going to be that motivated to enter it or to keep it clean or to be excited and stick around as a member of the organization. So I think it's a combination of all of those things. I don't think it has to be an overly burdensome exercise or strategy, but it does have to be something that's agreed on, and there has to be, I think, a few pillars that you're going to hold yourselves accountable to in order to evaluate whether your data activities and build out of a data-driven culture successful.
Awesome. Well, now we're just going to jump into some audience questions here for the last 9 to 10 minutes. We'll kick it off with Schaefer. He asked, can you share a few case studies / examples of where you use data, tickets, digital, social, etc., to help sell sponsorships? Does anyone have one off the top of their head they want to talk about?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about the ticket side, so I'm glad Schaefer asked this question. Everybody's looking for validation, and especially on the partnership side, and everybody wants data to back up the rationale behind doing a partnership. As we know, there's still so much emotion and trust behind partnerships, and there always will be. But I think that trust piece, the data helps back that up as well. So what we try and do is we'll use Nielsen Scarborough data. I mentioned tracking people coming to our website through a digital agency called QuantCast, and then again our Ticketmaster data. And this goes back to that understanding that fan 360. Who are they, and what are their buying patterns and habits. And so we've been able to track. It's great for partnership renewals, and we can track how did a certain partner index with our fans before they were a partner, and then years 2, years 3, years 4 in. And so we can show, and a great example, K-Love is a Christian radio station, and they're based here outside of Sacramento, and 3-year partnership, and we've been able to increase, they've indexed with our fans, index has grown 118% over that 3-year time. And so we're able to show them that hard data. And then another simple thing we do is just unaided recall. We send out a fan survey. We wait a month after the season's over, give them time to process everything. Then we send out a survey, and one of the questions is, who are some of the corporate sponsors of the River Cats? And so it's simple unaided recall. But then again, with K-Love, I was able to show how they compared to other radio stations, and even how their unaided recall was so much higher than our TV broadcast partner. And so it was a great message as we go into a renewal year with them to show how we've been able to significantly impact the River Cats fan base compared to the rest of the Sacramento region. And so it's building that strong case using that data on the impact that we know our sports and entertainment can have on people.
Awesome. Lisa, the same in terms of kind of what you guys have been able to do on the sponsorship side of things?
My involvement in this is somewhat limited just due to the structure of our ownership group. And so I personally don't play as much of a support role in terms of sponsorship, but I certainly, we've used the unaided recall that Chip just mentioned, specific to surveys that I am involved in. Another thing that we do to help better understand which assets are delivering value to our sponsors would be things like, asking fans, where do you remember seeing sponsors listed? That helps us put appropriate valuation on those assets. and make sure that we're aligning the assets that we have available with partners. The other just data points that our partners or our sponsors are always interested in are demographics and location. It really just depends on what the nature of that sponsorship is and the type of space in which they want to reach people. So we do a lot in the way of furnishing data that helps our sponsorship team approach prospects to say, hey, I know that you are very keen on the digital space. Here are our numbers that demonstrate our tremendous performance in this area, and here's our plans around it. So that's mainly where my team is involved in supporting our sponsorship.
Awesome. Great stuff. Now, let's see here. There's a couple other questions. I think there was one here relevant for you, Brian. They were talking about practices, from John. I'd love to hear some best practices for data aggregation / organization without a data warehouse. I know you were mentioning some spreadsheets that you guys use. So, what were kind of some tactics that you were using to make sure you were collecting whatever data you could? And has there been something that you thought before you have what you have now, stuff that was working for you?
I am not hearing you too well, and apologize for that. I'm going to need that one repeated again. I apologize.
No worries. Yep. So John, he had asked, would love to hear some best practices for data aggregation in an organization without a data warehouse. I know you had mentioned that you were talking about that you were using spreadsheets and something that you could potentially pass on about where you were able to find some ways to organize the data.
Yep, got most of that. Okay. Without a data warehouse, it's definitely hard. And you might think you have everything organized, and then there's a rep here or a rep there that does it completely different, and their information isn't included. So it's just getting everyone on the same page. All right, we're going to use Arctix as our CRM or Ticketmaster software, and then make sure that everyone's on the same page and that we're collecting data on the same level. So just communicating with everyone, making sure we're doing that, and have one system instead of 4 or 5 different ways that people are doing it, so we can pull from that and make use of what we're getting instead of just having lists upon lists that don't do anything for us.
Awesome. And let's see, we'll jump into maybe one more question here as we're running up against the hour. There's some good ones in here. I think this is a good one too. With the fact that we've become very data driven, how have you guys been able to take that data and turn it into a personal relationship instead of seeing that person as just a number or whatever it may be, or just like what they say here, a very bland and impersonal Chip? Has there been anything, or even Lisa or potentially Vince, that you guys have seen, or even Brian, that you guys have been able to take that data and still be able to be personal about that data?
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was going to say, on as far as getting the data, once we get it to our reps, they're the ones reaching out to them. So I think they do a great job of, adding the personal touch, we like to say around here, making sure that the customer, the fan, is comfortable going to them for whatever they happen to need. Having our sales and service, there's some negatives to that, but I think the main positive is they're dealing with one touch point here at the organization. So they're seeing them at games. They're reaching out about, if they need extra tickets, whatever it happens to be. So I think our reps are really great at making the customer feel comfortable and, not treating them as just another face in the crowd. They're a unique person to them, and make them feel like part of the team.
Yeah, I think it's a good, I like the question, but I think that it teases out a big misunderstanding that data is it makes things impersonal, or everybody is now a number. I think it's actually the opposite of that. It's about actually listening to fans through the data that they're willing to provide to you in order to better understand them. I got an email from somebody the other day talking about an email they received from an NBA team, that has a big data team, that was basically saying, hey, do you want to buy season tickets for this NBA team? And the person said, hey, these guys need you because the person in question was living in a completely different country, would never be interested in season tickets in 100 years. It makes no sense to them. And that's not really good enough anymore. Fans expect more. They're getting tons of emails, they're getting tons of marketing messaging, and if you're not listening to the data or interpreting it, then you're really detracting from the affinity and willingness of fans to engage with you in the future. So I think it's about using that data to better understand them, to have the relevant conversations.
Yeah, and I'll add what I touched on, those significant touch points. We're using the data to get us closer to the fan and letting them meet us, get to know us, and kind of see behind the scenes that we're not just a big sports entity that treats everybody like a number. We want to let them know they're unique and they're special to us, and we've got to find that right communication channel to get that information to them. And so, yeah, I would say that the data does the opposite. It helps you get to know people better and then treat them as unique individuals.
It's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours talking about this, but I really did want to thank everyone who joined us to be able to talk some data as well. And as we go forward, thanks again to Vince and Stellar Argo for putting this on, and we're looking forward to conversation as we go, and hopefully seeing a lot of these new data-driven teams and cultures spring up as a result of it. So again, thank you all, and Vince and Chip and Lisa and Brian, afternoon with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.